right, here we go. Should you punch in a street fight? Should you punch in a street fight? All right. In my opinion, this is a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer, and it is something that it is a problem, because what happens is that there are people who, in an attempt to be different, an attempt to buck the system, in an attempt to come across as being profound, will often say things that go against empirical evidence. Okay? And then if people revere them, and I've said this before and I will continue to say it, in American martial arts, and this shows with Eddie Bravo, with like I said before, if you listen to Eddie Bravo when it comes down to self-defense, he'll get you killed. His partner, Joe Rogan, complete martial arts fraud. And I want someone to say, well, tell me how he's a martial arts fraud, because I will post a video breaking down Joe Rogan's past and how Joe Rogan is a complete and utter fraud. And I would say it to his face. Okay? The bottom line is this. There are too many people in America where it is a cult of personality. So when they hear something from a certain kind of person, when they hear something, especially, you know, if a person has like in their logo a skull and crossbones or something like that, you know, or it's talking about doomsday, you know, and Muslims run up in their house, you know, and black people run, and, you know, you better get ready for Armageddon. Those people are believed, and most of those people are contrary to empirical evidence. So should you punch in a street fight? Should you use your fist in a street fight? Let's look at the evidence. Okay, let's say that you've had 2 street fights, and I hope none of you have had street fights. I hope none of you have had street fights. But let's say you've had 2 street fights, and let's say you've witnessed, right, maybe 4 street fights. Okay, now there are some people, all right, who live in rougher parts of the world, who have witnessed maybe 50, 60 street fights and have had maybe 10, 20 themselves. What is the ratio to street fights and broken hands being reported in those street fights? What is the ratio of street fights that you know have taken place, right, and having a broken hand having been reported in those street fights? 70 to 1? 70 to 1? Maybe for every 70 street fights, somebody might get a broken hand, right? And these are unskilled people punching the skull. Okay? Let's look at boxing. We're talking about 8-ounce gloves, 10-ounce gloves with some, I suppose, right? But let's look at 8-ounce gloves. When we look at the amount of fights that come on, the Zone, right? Premier Boxing Champions, right? Right? We look at them. We look at ESP Top Rank fights, right? We look at all those fights, Golden Boy fights, right? How many fights are reportedly ended with one or more participants suffering a broken hand? How many? What? Maybe, again, 70 to 1? 70 to 1? MMA. Look at the UFC. Look at Bellator. Look at other venues, right? They come on regularly. Regularly. How many? 4-ounce gloves now. We're talking about gloves smaller than boxing gloves. 4-ounce gloves. Okay? 4-ounce gloves. How many broken hands are reported as a result of those fights? How many broken hands? Again, let's go. 70 to 1, right? And now let's look at bare knuckle boxing. Now bare knuckle boxing has become popular. Look at that, for sure. You should have a lot of broken hands in bare knuckle boxing. A lot. Now, I'm not saying, there's no broken hands in any of those sports, in any of those particular avenues that I'm talking about. But what I'm saying is we need to look at the evidence and ask ourselves, is the question something that we should be concerned with? Is the question something we be concerned with, right? So if we look at bare knuckle boxing, how many broken hands have been reported in bare knuckle boxing bouts? How many? Again, bare knuckle. What are we talking about? Maybe 40 to 1? Maybe 40 to 1 for every 40 fights there might be a broken hand? The reality is this, is there has never been a weapon created by nature or God, right? Some by man, but not by nature nor God. You choose, right? Which one you want to refer to or attribute the fist to. There's never been a weapon that works in such a way as the fist attached to the arm in a sort of mace-like ball and chain type of execution that can inflict blunt force trauma and pain upon a human body like the fist. Okay? There's never been a weapon created by nature or God that is that brilliant. Blunt force trauma, creating, by that I mean internal bleeding, rupture, things of that nature, right? Concussions, pain, damaging the nerve centers, pain receptors, right? And why? Because you can use the fist in a hammer, you can use in between the four knuckles, a vertical, you can even use the knuckles. This create blunt force trauma, inflict blunt force trauma upon the body. But then you have pain. And you have pain that you can inflict because your knuckles are hard and some of them are sharp to a point. Sharp enough to damage severely. Pain receptors and nerves, things that control pain themselves. There's never been, again, a weapon used in a ball and chain fashion. The chain being your arm, the ball being your fist. There's never been a weapon created or used that is more brilliant than the fist attached to the arm when it comes down to inflicting blunt force trauma and pain upon the human body. Empirical evidence says that if your health and or your life depends on how you come across or how you handle a violent situation, in which case you must be violent, right? That you should punch. Yes, that you should punch. And again, there are people who are entrusted with the life and health of people who should take their place on YouTube and social media much more seriously and use empirical evidence when it comes down to saying what should be done, what shouldn't be done. Now, I'm not saying you won't break your hand. What I am saying is that empirical evidence shows that the chances of you breaking your hand is extremely slim, and slim enough for you to punch if need be. For those people who see me sometimes with a laptop, I want to say that all of these comments that I give you are right off the top of my head from my personal experience. When you see the laptop and I happen to look down at it, it's because I'm working on my master's in social theory and 2 manuscripts on bad faith. You might have heard of Jean-Paul Sartre and his covering of bad faith, but bad faith and anti-black racism. I'm working on my thesis. My thesis is going to actually be on that, the irrationality of anti-black white racism. And so you see me working on that, and I might be looking at that sometimes to make sure that this computer or this laptop doesn't crash. All right? But everything I tell you is off the top of my head from sheer experience. Should you punch in a street fight if your life or health is dependent upon it? Absolutely, it's a no-brainer, and I don't think you should pay attention to anyone who says that you should not. Okay? My name is Saif Carmen, Walking Encyclopedia of Martial Arts on social media. I'll see you in the next video.